This is my indie game, Perla Central, my JRPG inspired love child, and I'm Allie, YOLO. Thanks for stopping by today. Welcome to the Devlog. My first video was a fairly general overview of the project, so for today, let's go over one of the more basic features I've implemented. Let's talk about lifting. However, speaking of that last video, I just wanted to thank everyone who watched it. I was blown away by the reception it received and all the nice comments left on it. I'm not very optimistic about social media, so I'm grateful my expectations were wrong. It was really motivating for me, and I hope I can continue to impress. Okay, now on to the rest of the video. As a game mechanic, lifting isn't new by any stretch of the imagination. Although, I feel it's a lot less common than its older brother pushing, or would it be younger? Some games like to feature lifting, pushing, and pulling. From what I can tell, it's a fun way to interact with the game environment. Initially, I had planned to implement pushing rather than lifting actually, since it's a staple in quite a few games I'm referencing, like Pokemon and Zelda. However, I ended up having a few issues with my implementation, which Luckily, around this time, a short clip of Rune Factory 3 crossed my Twitter feed, and I decided to just yoink it. This worked out a lot better than pushing, and I think it has a lot of potential, so I ended up implementing it. I started by writing up a plan. Writing down a clear breakdown of a mechanic or feature can go a long way in helping you implement it, I think. Sadly, I don't do this as much as I'd like, but I bring it up regardless since it's a good habit you might want to take away from this. I think it helps even if you start writing after coding something up like I usually do. The mechanic is lifting. Pretty much what I want is after the player interacts with a liftable object, their animation should change and the liftable should follow them around. This is about all we need to give the illusion that the player is carrying something. The player should handle its state and animation changes, and the object being lifted should handle changes to its own position. Another good thing to note, or at least think about, is why a mechanic is being implemented. You want as many parts of your game to fall in line with the experience you're trying to bring to the player, or aid the gameplay loop in some fashion. In Perla Central's case, this lifting mechanic is more related to the gameplay loop, specifically the first of the 3 E's, exploration, which is a topic I covered in my previous video. Maybe check it out after this one if you haven't seen it. Your write-up doesn't need to be super comprehensive, to be honest. You can just jot some quick notes down in a sketchbook or as comments in your IDE. Yeah, I'm not really the greatest source of advice for this. Anyway, let's check out the programming now. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. So, I'm personally working in Godot 4 with GD script, but I'll try to explain this as engine agnostic as I can. Don't expect too much though, since I've only ever used Godot, Scratch, and Twine if you count that. This is a really poor tutorial, if not just me rambling about my goofy ass code. Sorry about that. The first step of getting this to work is initiation. I already have an interaction system set up, so I'll be using that. When the player interacts with something, an onInteraction method is called on the object in question. Here, I set a boolean to true, disable some pesky things that I don't want to happen while the player is lifting, you know, like gravity and collision. Then, I start updating the object's position every physics frame to be the player's position plus an offset so it appears over them. FYI, the code is actually not this clean. Now for the player side of things. My player controller uses a poorly managed state machine. I'm not going to explain what a state machine is, but if you want to implement one similar to mine, I followed the tutorial by Bitlytic. Dang, where did I put that link again? Oh yeah, right under the like button. Wink, wink, hint, hint. Sorry about that. During interaction, the state machine enters an interact state, which calls a process interaction method on the player. Inside this method, I'll handle what should be done when the player needs to lift something. Firstly, to keep it classy, I'll set a boolean to true. Second, I keep a reference to the object that's being lifted in a variable called held. Lastly, I update the animations. Easy as pie, not really. And now, when a player lifts this crate, everything works well enough. Next, I need to implement dropping. It would be quite rough to pick something up and never be able to put it down again. I've bound drop to the same key as interaction to keep things simple. I'll have my state machine move to a drop state on this event, and I'll call a drop method on the player controller. In this drop method, I use a raycast to check right in front of the player to make sure it's free of obstacles. Speedrunners hate this, but I gotta do the bare minimum to keep glitch hunters in business. If the area in front of the player is free, I use the reference to the held object to call a drop method on it. When I call this method, I pass goes along the drop position also. With that, I do some cleanup and update the animations again. However, if the position in front of the player isn't free, I'll just notify that to the player, exit out of the method, and pretend nothing happened. On the object, it received the drop position, so now it can stop saying the position every frame and set itself down onto the position that was passed in. We can also re-enable gravity and collision, or else it won't set itself down and just kind of float there forever. But with that, we have lifting and dropping. That was a bit simple, sorry. But to be honest, if we went over my spaghetti properly, we'd be here until Silk Song comes out. So, that's the mechanic. It's implemented in a component-esque fashion so I can easily add it to any object I want, like a chest or maybe a cat. While lifting, the player can't jump. I think it's an interesting limitation to have to work around. Navigating somewhere with an object in your hands can be a fun challenge to implement in quests and dungeons that will recontextualize the space you're in. You can also throw the object you're lifting, which feels pretty fun to do after you stack some up. I have a few ideas for things to carry around, but what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear any ideas or suggestions down in the comments. I'd spend some time plugging my super nifty Discord server here, but that outro music is starting to swell up, and I don't want to keep you here for too long. Guess that'll be all for now. See ya.